building. At the back of the council chambers to your right, the stairs will take you out the front of the building. Just past that on the right is the men's facility, and the stairs to the left is the ladies' facility. Please do not use the elevator in time of emergency.
Thank you, sir. Well, we have a presentation. Councilman Tassoni will be presenting it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me. My 22 years in public service, I pick up the phone and I call Local 57 when in fact we need something in the town, whether it be lights, whether it be ball fields, softball fields, whatever we need. Local 57 is there and never denied me of anything that I've asked of them. So I wanted to recognize Local 57 today for all the accomplishments that they've helped us with in Smithfield. They don't know it, but there's going to be more that I ask of them in the coming year. So with that being said, if Jimmy White, would you step forward, please? Do you want me to go down there?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. White, on behalf of the town of Smithfield and the Smithfield Town Council, I want to present you with this home plate to Local 57 with appreciation for your ongoing support for the town of Smithfield. Thank you so much, and thank you to your members for doing this work.
Thank you, members of the council. I appreciate it. Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. And I have no doubt it's not the end of the requests of Senator Tassoni. Thank you. Again.
Thank you, so awesome. Next up, we have a presentation for the U.S. EPA update on the Davis Liquid Waste Site.
So you just got to click on it first to bring it up and you can switch.
Anybody wants color copies? Yes, please. Free. All right. Good morning. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Cunningham. I'm with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. However, I will say I am a resident of Rhode Island. I live down in West Kingston. With me is Aaron Shaheen. He is the Community Involvement Coordinator for this project. He interfaces with the community and puts out fact sheets and things like that. We also have Darryl Lucy. He's the former project manager. He's a wealth of knowledge that I ask questions to all the time. And Gary Jablonski of Rhode Island DEM. He is the state of Rhode Island DEM project manager. So he's kind of my counterpart, and we work together on this site. All right, next slide. So just to get you a little oriented, if you're not familiar with what the site is, it's in the upper left-hand corner there. The larger red area is the actual site itself, and the solid red area is where the majority of the dumping occurred. So you can kind of both see the scale and location of the property. The other thing I'll say about this area is, as I'm sure you all know, this is a relatively rural area where the majority of residents are on private wells. So obviously any contamination in that area that risks getting into wells is of concern. Next slide. This is an extremely brief, compressed timeline of the site. We believe the majority of the dumping at the site occurred between around 1976 and 1977. And what we had was a situation where both solid and liquid wastes were dumped on site into unlined lagoons and pits. What I'll also mention is it wasn't just liquid waste, as some members might know. This was also the site of what was believed to be the largest tire pile east of the Mississippi. So that really complicated a lot of things at this site. In 1983, the site was added to the National Priorities List. So that means it essentially became a Superfund site and managed in part by EPA with our state partners. Between 1997 and 2001, about 1,400 drums, 15,000 laboratory containers, and over 12 million tires were removed from the site. And I'll talk a little bit more about the complexity of that in a minute. In 1997, the municipal water supply went online, which provides a permanent water source to the impacted residents. And you'll see in a site plan later on where the water line goes. But this is a very important milestone for the site, because up until that point, the residents in the immediate area had contaminated drinking water. They were provided by Rhode Island DEM either with a treatment system or bottled water. However, this gave them a permanent solution where they have a permanent water source they could use instead of their groundwater wells, which was contaminated. Between 1999 and 2001, about 78,000 tons, that's roughly equivalent to about 52,000 cubic yards of contaminated soil was treated on site. And I know that's a very abstract number, but if you think about, if you're getting mulch delivered, you usually get it in 5 cubic yards, 10 cubic yards. So a lot of soil at the site was treated. Between 2001 and 2018, there was a lot of monitoring of groundwater and development of a comprehensive plan to treat the contaminated groundwater. And initially, the plan was pump and treat. And unfortunately, due to the unique geology at the site, that was found to be infeasible. And we kind of had to start over that process. And in 2022, a new feasibility study was finally complete. And later on, in I believe it was June 2020, there were public hearings and a record of decision for the new groundwater remedy. And between 2020 and 2023, which brings us up to now, obviously, additional groundwater wells were installed. We're in the middle of performing tracer tests and refining the remedy, and we expect this remedy to begin next year, 2024. I do want to say, however, that it's an interim remedy. So what we're doing is basically using the best science available to guide what we're doing and use that to decide how to go forward. And it's an iterative process, and we are going to hopefully next year, we'll see how it works next year, and then we'll look at it regularly to see the best way to move forward. All right, so this is an aerial photo. I believe it's actually from 1989 and not 1991, as it says. But the important thing here is, so this is the actual site. What I want to point out is the red circle is the actual site itself. And all of that black area in the northeastern section, those are all tires. And so it kind of gives you a sense of the scale of what's going on here. The dumping occurred in the eastern corner there. You'll see it better in the next slide. But just want to point out at this point that you have liquid waste being dumped into soil. You have drums, you have lab packs, you have all this other stuff, and then you have tires on top of it. So I'm sure as the fire department in the room knows that tires are a significant fire hazard, and this is one of the reasons why this took so long, is because of trying to reduce the risk of a tire fire in this area. Next slide. So this is the same exact view. So Eric, can you just go back quickly and forward again? So you can see the lakes and the streams are in the same area. So this is the same exact view. Go back, yeah. Same exact area, except now this is from 2011. All of the tires, all of the drums, lab packs have been removed, and it looks like a relatively clean site. The other thing that happened is the area in blue, that is where all the contaminated soil was removed, treated on site, and then returned to the ground and then revegetated. So all those little dots you see there, those are all new trees. And having been at the site a couple months ago, those are mostly mature trees now. And really, if you're walking around, you might not even know it was once a Superfund. It's a Superfund site. Next slide. Now, the problem is when you pour liquid waste onto soil, it has a tendency to, go down. And that's exactly what happened at this site. It went through what we call the overburden down into the bedrock and into fractures and other things in the bedrock. And that is very difficult to remediate. So what this figure here shows is an approximate area of the current area of groundwater contamination. And what you can see is that the groundwater in this section is flowing generally north. So it's a little difficult to see, but you can see that there's gradations of the red. And in the bottom, that's the most contaminated. And then as you move north, it becomes less contaminated. However, still contaminated. The other thing I'll point out on this slide is the blue lines there. Those are all the new municipal water lines. So it's the entire length of it is not shown just for scale purposes, but all of Log Road is essentially on water lines because of the contamination from this property. Yeah, next slide. So this just shows you a little bit more about the process of what happened at the site. So at the top, you can see, people dumping stuff into the ground, and the red arrows indicate the liquid going down to the surface. Now, that blue line there, horizontal blue line, that is the groundwater table. So that's at the site between 5 and 10 feet below the surface. And once it reaches that, it generally flows north. And what we were able to do is remove the majority of the soil that's contaminated, so remove the contamination source above it. However, we still have the contamination in the water. And then that area that's crosshatched below it, that's weathered bedrock. So when I say weathered bedrock, just think of rock that's been exposed to different forces. It's loose, it's kind of gravelly, there's a lot of holes and fractures in it, and if you were to pour water on it, it would just absorb right in rather than just stick on a flat surface. And then below that, you have what are called fractures. These happen naturally, and that's where we get a lot of our groundwater from, actually. However, in this case, what happens is the contaminants migrated downwards are into these fractures. And once they're in these fractures, they are extremely difficult to reach and remediate. And a lot of times they're almost impossible to recover because it's very difficult to, number one, find the fractures from the surface, because there's really no way to look down and say, hey, there's a fracture right there. I'm going to go drill a well and suck it out. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. So what we are planning on doing, so where are we now is the residential properties are now connected to public water. That means they are protected from the majority of the contaminants at the site. So that's definitely a good thing. The surface soils have been treated to concentrations consistent with EPA and state guidelines. So there's a negligible risk to off-site residents. So as long as you're not trespassing on this site or doing something else, you should not be affected by it. There's going to be institutional controls to limit direct exposure. So what that means is if you're one of those houses on Log Road and you have contaminated groundwater, an institutional control would make it, would prevent you from installing a well to use groundwater for drinking. You might say, why would you do that? A lot of people just don't know, and having institutional controls in place are very good for home sales and developers and things like that, just so they can go to the record and say, oh, there's a problem here. Because otherwise, it could be difficult to tell. Now, the groundwater remedy that we're currently in the middle of is required by the 2020 Record of Decision, is going to use what's called enhanced biodegradation as a remedy. So this involves injecting naturally occurring materials to promote natural biodegradation and breakdown to non-toxic and natural compounds. It's been demonstrated effective and safe at multitude of Superfund sites around the country, and even in Rhode Island at state sites. Currently, like I said, we're doing tracer studies to understand where, if we inject something at point A, where exactly it's going to go to make sure that it's going to reach the contamination and go where we want it to go to work. Essentially, what we're injecting are essentially emulsified vegetable oil, nutrients, vitamin C. It just scavenges oxygen. It's an interesting process, and if you have more questions, we're happy to answer. And there's also a lot on our website about it. If you want, you can read the whole, I think it's 4,000-page report on it. And that's like. So moving forward, like I said, the election is tentatively scheduled to actually start in probably, hopefully, January 2024. It's going to be an iterative process. It's going to last in the initial stages a minimum of 10 years. So they're going to inject it, and we're going to watch the data for 10 years to see how it works. And if it works well, we continue with that remedy. If it does not work well, then we kind of go back to the drawing board again and look for a new solution. Now, I will say that institutional controls are required in the Record of Decision, and that is to prevent the use of groundwater around the site. So ROD actually specifies institutional controls at tax plat 50 lots 9, 27, 27A, and 29. And that generally describes what must be done, but not necessarily how. So when I say institutional control, there are several ways to do that. The most common are zoning ordinances and land use restrictions, so deed restrictions. In Rhode Island, the most often called environmental land use restrictions that go on the deed. And what EPA likes to do is stack multiple institutional controls on top of each other. So you might have a zoning ordinance and a land use restriction at the same time, just as kind of a safety net. So if something goes wrong and it's not covered in one category, you have the other category as kind of a backup. So if someone's doing something or developing it, they kind of have to miss it twice, which is much harder. And institutional controls are interesting in that the responsible party, so the group does the contamination, and their representatives are responsible to work with the municipality and impacted parties to develop and implement the institutional controls under DEM and EPA oversight. So in general, EPA and DEM, we do not go to towns and say, you need to put an institutional control here. That's generally the responsibility of the responsible party. However, if the responsible party makes a good faith effort to implement these controls, but for whatever reason can't, EPA will get involved sometimes. However, we're not anywhere close to that point this time. So I know there were a lot of questions about institutional controls coming from the group, and that's essentially more or less how institutional controls work. And it's really a negotiation between the town and the PRP. So as long as lots 9, 27, 27A, and 29 are included in whatever is done, that's the minimum that's required. I do know that at one point the town had proposed a much larger groundwater ordinance that was based upon historical groundwater concentrations. So if that's being more protective, and that's a good thing. It's always better to be more protective. And so you have to, I would urge you to look forward to development in this area. Right now, it's very rural. I do know that there's been discussions about developing and selling this property itself. There's a lot of issues with that aside the fact, but I would urge you to take into consideration future development of the site, what might happen down the road. I mean, I don't think you're going to be getting large multi-family development, but you could get a lot of the development there. So it's something to consider when you're looking at these institutional controls and talking with the PRP group. I think that's it. All right, and if you have any questions for me, Erin, or anyone else, please let me know.
Joe, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the residents are protected from the majority of the ingestion of contaminants. Which ones are they not protected from? Which ones are left as far as?
So it's not that a specific contaminant is not present anymore. It's more that there are a few residences who chose not to be connected to the water line. So we can't force anybody to be connected to a water line and not stop using their well. There are, I believe, currently 4 residential properties along that area that are not connected to the water line for various reasons. Sometimes it's they don't want public water. They think the water's fine. They don't want to pay the water bill. There's a lot of reasons for that.
So you're saying they're protected because they're not connected to the water?
No. So no, those 4 residents in particular, those would likely not be protected historically. Now, having said that, the size of the plume has significantly decreased since the water line was put in. And that's just because of the soil removal, the source removal. And once you do that, things start to dilute and move off site. And the plume size in their figure I showed you earlier with the red circles, that's more or less what the plume size is right now. So and I will also mention that we do monitor 2 of those properties as part of our annual monitoring, and there are contaminants present, but they're below the federal and state standards.
Well, that's what you mean by protected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said the plume line was moving north, was growing. Is it going into areas that are do not have municipal water?
So it's not growing. The groundwater is flowing north. It's kind of reached a point right now where it's at steady state. So if we were talking back in 1983, I would say yes, definitely the plume is growing because the groundwater is driving it north. But right now it's like 43 years old. So what you have going on is it's kind of reached a steady state where you have naturally occurring biodegradation and dilution occurring at the northern fringe. And that is balanced by the new material moving forward. So barring any major hydrological change at the site, we wouldn't expect it to move much further north than it is right now. However, the properties north of that plume, those are on the water line. So even if it did move north by a significant margin, those residents would still be protected because they are on the water line.
Joe, the 4 individuals you're talking about that are not hooked up to the water,
Yes.
have you had discussions with them why they're not hooked up to the water? Is it cost?
So that would be something I've had this site for 6 months now, so that, we're talking, that something happened in 1993, I believe. I don't know, Daryl, if you happen to remember.
Yes, some of the fire people before me did approach these, some of the individuals that are on Log Road and such, and a lot of them wouldn't even answer the door. They sent letters to them asking them to leave, at least the end of the pipe, so to speak, that would connect to the house, and even in that case, it was simply a matter of them looking at the cost, I think, of just paying a water bill.
Joe and Garrett on the same thing, one of these sites, that is something that's very common, that, we bring the data to them saying that, there is contaminants, you would benefit from, connecting to a municipal water line with some residents, feel very strongly about using their private well, and they just don't do it. Like I said, we can't force them to connect, it's by their own accord, so.
Well, the argument of paying a water bill doesn't hold water to me, because the cost, if you have to run 100-foot water line to your house, that's enormous cost. So what I would propose is that if you can go back to those 4 individuals and find out if in fact there was funding available that they could utilize and hook up to the water lines, that would be great. Because I just got my water bill today, $55. If anybody cannot afford a $55 water bill, when you're looking at maybe 20 or 30,000 to hook up to the water line, that's a big difference.
So what
That's my first
yeah, go ahead.
question. The second question is, can you tell me what kind of data that you're collecting? Is it data of people who may come down with cancer? Is it data, what data are you collecting?
Sure. So just on your first point, we are planning likely later this summer to reassess and do some community outreach in that area, and that will involve attempting to talk to those four houses. And I believe at least one of them are still on the normal groundwater monitoring system, where the responsible party's contractor goes out and actually samples their water, and we include that as a data source. But we are planning on going back out and, going through this again. Now, the unfortunate thing is the way the funding and laws are structured is that you essentially don't get a second bite of the apple for water lines. So what essentially happened at the time was EPA and the contractors went out and said, yep, we will, I shouldn't say, EPA, the PRP, and their contractor went out and essentially said, we will connect you to the water line for free. The only thing is you have to pay the monthly bill. And at several of these sites, there's actually a water line that goes into their basement already, and it's just not connected to their home plumbing. So, and I can know of 2 instances where we were recently asked about this because one property was transferred and sold. And unfortunately, the way the law and the funding works is if they don't accept it at the time, that the funding kind of goes away for doing it again. And we recently had somebody ask about that, and we did look into it. And unfortunately, both EPA and the state of Rhode Island does not have a mechanism to make that final connection, because when they refused the connection back in 1993, they gave up their right to EPA paying for it.
But that didn't give up the right of the new homeowner.
It unfortunately did.
How can that be?
I'm not an attorney, so I can't really speak to that. But I think
The other question too,
Yes.
do you have sign-offs on these people? Does the town have sign-offs? Because if something happens, we're gonna get sued.
That's something we have to look into. That was way before
I
my
mean-
time.
23 years, somebody should have looked at this. I mean, I was around when the dump was a dump. I used to ride my mini bike up there when the dump was a dump. It was a dump.
It was a dump, yeah.
A big dump. And now it seems like anybody that had involvement in it wants to wash their hands and say, well, you know, we asked them 23 years ago, but Susie sold her house 10 years ago. Now these poor people could be on the hook now for $20,000, $30,000 to hook up to the water, and you're saying that if someone said no, the previous owner said no, now the new owner's stuck? I don't buy that.
Well, how much is the cost of just making the final connection?
So in the majority of the cases that the water line is in the basement already, it's just not connected to the home plumbing. So it's a matter of putting a meter in and just connected to the home plumbing. So it'd be significantly less than $20,000 or $30,000, although I don't have an exact figure. We can definitely talk to our EPA site attorney and have them, are you John?
Mhm.
Okay. We can have them reach back out to you with a answer on exactly the legal logistics of that.
I think they need to go to Anthony, not me. I'm
Okay.
not an attorney. I only played one on TV for 12 years.
Okay. And to answer the second part of your question about what data is being collected, contaminant concentrations are being collected biannually at the site, so twice a year. And essentially monitoring the plume, monitoring all the wells in the area, so we know what the concentrations are, what's where. And in this new phase, a lot more wells were installed to track the progress of our remedy. And in those, we'll be collecting the same kind of just basic groundwater chemistry, but also contaminant concentrations, and things like that. And what happens to that data is EPA has risk assessors who take a look at that data and will look at the average use exposure scenarios. And what they'll do is they'll develop what are called cancer risk factors or hazard indexes to basically show how likely you would be to get cancer from exposure or have another medical injury from exposure. And there are standards, it's usually 1 in a million incidence rate. And if it exceeds that, then they would be, that's a problem. If it's below that, it's something that's monitored more closely to make sure the data is correct. But essentially, the risk assessor will, just basically looks at if someone lives across the street from this, the air they're breathing, are they going to get sick from that? Yeah, and then they'll make a decision, yes, no, based upon the data. And that's essentially what the data is used for.
Joe, what are the contaminants? I'm sorry.
What are the
did you
contaminants?
mention what the contaminants are?
So yeah, the groups are volatile organic carbons and semi-volatile organic carbons. So what that means is essentially trichloroethylene, vinyl chloride, benzenes. Essentially what they are solvents and things that make up oils. And they're actually very, very common. Of the sites in New England that are Superfund sites, I'd say probably 90% of them have these compounds. So it's very common for dump sites, especially in Rhode Island. I have a site over in North Smithfield and Burrville. It's the same situation. And what essentially happened back in the 60s and 70s is people who would dump stuff would just go around to different properties across the state, dump a little here, dump a little here. So we see a lot of similar compounds.
But the other thing too is the cancer issue.
Yes.
On this side of town, over here, the Wansketucket, a lot of dumping of old mills, the Gray Iron Foundry, and they've done a number of studies. And we seem to see a lot more cancer on this side of town than the other side of town.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion would be, if you could, is make sure that you keep a tally. If you see a spike over in that particular area, then you know something is not working.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's all. That's done and accounted for by the risk assessors. Yes.
And
we'll definitely, when we do some more outreach in the summer, as we are continuing what we're doing, we're definitely gonna reach out to those 4 residents again, like I said, talk to site attorney, see what can be done, just to make sure, that they understand, what the status is, just so it can be involved to you, and try to, that's what we're doing.
Right, but it's not just the water up there. It's not just the water. There's a whole host of things that we need to be concerned about up there. I mean, the trees, maybe the trees are growing faster than we ever thought before. Why is that? Well, you got a lot of stuff down there that the trees are, now, you're planting a 1-foot tree, next year, you got a 60-foot tree. Something's making that tree grow fast. So there's a lot of other things other than water that we need to keep an eye on up there, because believe me, as a kid, I saw a lot of things up there, and I'm going to my grave with it.
Any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
All right, and if anything comes to you, please feel free to email me or Aaron. Our emails are back to the presentation. We're happy to answer. All right,
Thank you. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 6, minutes. Move that the minutes of the March 21st, 2023 work session meeting be approved as recorded. Do
So move.
I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 1 abstain. Motion carries. Item B, move that the minutes of the April 4th, 2023 executive session held pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws, Section 42-46-5A1, personnel to interview Donna Keegan, Keith Christensen, Beverly Tobin, and Matthew Faig. Matthew Faig was not there. For possible appointment or reappointment to a town board or commission be approved as recorded and sealed.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, move that the minutes of the April 4th, 2023 open session meeting be approved as recorded.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, consider, discuss, and act upon the following possible appointments and reappointments. A, Historic Preservation Commission appointment with a term expiring in February of 2024.
Mr. President, I move that the Smithfield Town Council appoint Beverly Tobin to the Historic Preservation Commission with a term expiring in February of 2024.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, Personnel Board reappointment with a term expiring in March of 2026.
Mr. President, I move that the Smithfield Town Council reappoint Keith Christensen to the Personnel Board with a term expiring in March of 2026.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Last one, item C, Economic Development Commission, reappointment with the term expiring in March of 2026.
Mr. President, I move that the Smithfield Town Council reappoint Donna Keegan to the Economic Development Commission with a term expiring in March of 2026.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8, public hearings. Conduct a public hearing to consider a request for abandonment of a portion of the Pine Drive right-of-way. This is a public hearing. I declare it open. Anyone from the public like to come up and speak? Just state your name and your address, please.
Paul McCarthy, 16 Pine Drive, also 0 Pine Drive owner. This is a dirt road that connects the back of Pine and Maury Drive. It's not maintained by the town. We've been living there about 20 years. We've been maintaining it. There's been several log length trees that have fallen across it. We've cleared over the years. Recently, about a year ago, we had a neighbor sell us a quarter-acre vacant lot that abuts this property. I've been working with Mike and planning for about a year to find the best route to abandon this property. We'd like to absorb it into our property, pay taxes on it. As part of the process, there was an ad in the Observer that went out for 3 weeks stating that if anyone was opposed to this and they're in a butter, that they could show up. I see that I have a couple of neighbors here that I'm sure are against this. according to the ad, they have to be in a butter, so I don't know if I'm reading that wrong, but I am the only abutter to this strip of property. I understand these people walk down it, they walk their dogs down it. It's not about that. There's been a lot of delivery trucks, oil trucks, everybody's come ripping down it. It's become a bit of a safety issue. We've done all the proper title searches, surveys, worked with a lawyer, and like I said, coordinating with Mike and planning. And happy to take any questions.
Who pays taxes on it?
It is nobody's paying taxes on it. It's not making any money right
So
now.
you're not paying any taxes?
No, it's an unnamed road. The Pine Drive and Maury Drive both end, the asphalt ends, and it's all dirt back there. It's kind of overgrown. It's a big pine grove back there. This has just been a path in the dirt that has no name, and hasn't been maintained, or it's just been there. Just the people in the neighborhood know about it. But I mean, I live on it. I've been maintaining it for 20 years. And since purchasing the adjacent lot, it's a vacant lot. It's a nice buffer zone in the neighborhood. This 25-foot by 100-foot strip has been landlocked by the property we own now. So we'd like to make it better, pay taxes on it.
What is your plan for it?
I really don't have a plan. I just want to know that we could, we have the ability to, close it off if we wanted to, maintain it more. It's just it's a dirt path, it's a very rough area back there. And now that we landlocked it in, it doesn't affect anyone. It doesn't, I understand and have neighbors that walk their dog down it. It doesn't affect this water area back there. It doesn't affect any water access. They could still walk around the other way to get to the water. If you look at the map schematic that I gave you, it's a landlocked piece of land. It doesn't affect anyone's access to anywhere.
Paul, what is the main reason why you want this abandoned? I'm just.
The main reason is over the past several years, the delivery trucks we got kids back there, they come ripping down it. It's very overgrown. The trucks don't fit down it so great. They knock all the branches coming down. Every once in a while, we get a dirt bike that comes ripping down it from the neighborhood. Some kids in a dirt bike, we don't know where they're coming from. And it's a safety issue. We got kids back there. Yeah.
I'm just thinking the other side of that. I did drive down there because I had no idea what it was. So, but if they're coming down either Maury or Pine, they're gonna have to do like a 3-point turn, and wouldn't that? I guess they're not
Yes.
speeding in that case, but they're still probably be a
Yes.
pain.
They are.
Right.
They are both dead ends. I've talked to the highway department. There's enough room back there to turn all the trucks around. I'm on the fire department here in town. I've turned a truck around there. I've turned a truck around down there, both streets, multiple times. The dirt road that cuts across, it's not big enough for a big truck to go down it.
Would you still, in the meantime, when you're figuring out a plan, would you still allow your neighbors to walk their dogs down there if we decided to?
I don't have an issue with that. I don't have an issue with that. Yes.
Anyone else? This is a public hearing, so anyone can speak. Mike?
Mike Phillips, Town Planner. I just wanted to let you know that I did talk to Gene Allen, the Public Works Director, and because the shore is a plow drive, he's actually plowed Pine Drive, and he doesn't use that street to plow. He just, plows straight. But he did mention that it would be nice to have at least an area on the Pine Drive side that he could turn in and turn around on a hammerhead. So that's one thing he suggested, if it was the council's decision to abandon it, to maybe leave a portion that he could have at least a turnaround there. He indicated that the town has not maintained it over these years. I'm not quite sure that it meets the standard of abandonment now that we're seeing that it's being used, even if it's by delivery trucks, it's still, public is using it, even if it's, delivery trucks. So that's one thing we have to consider, whether it rises to that standard of, really being an abandoned, unused
I have a question,
roadway.
Mr. Phelps. So
It has to, legally, it has to cease to be useful to the public.
Yeah.
that's where I was going with that question. So if there is in fact delivery trucks being used, why has the town not been maintaining this roadway?
Quite honestly, in looking at the records and the deeds here, there's really no reference to this being accepted or, some of the deeds refer to an unnamed street. It wasn't ever accepted by the town. And, there's some aerials back in the 1950s that show when, it looks like when Maury Drive and Pine Drive, the other coming off of Log Road were being built, they were gravelled. This road crossing the unnamed road looked like it was roughed in at the same time. So it looks like the town at one point developed this roadway, but just left it. It just never really got used because, there were a few houses on it and they were dead ends and no one really, other than people in the neighborhood, ever used it.
So if this council, for example, was to say that we weren't interested in the abandonment of this, would that in turn say to our highway and our streets department that we, from here on, will now be taking
I
care of
would
it?
think we would have to accept responsibility for maintaining it, keeping it open.
Thank you.
Can't we tell by the deed descriptions whether or not the road is really there?
Like I said, I read the deed descriptions of the properties around there, and they refer to an unnamed street. That's basically it. So,
Well, I mean, if you looked at the meets and bounds for Mr. McCarthy's two properties, would we be able to tell if the road is really there?
yeah, I mean, it appears to be there based on those deeds. Yeah, and the fact that it shows up on our plat maps. I mean, that's. And we had a lengthy discussion with, between the attorneys about whether, we could show that it was really a town-owned right-of-way. And, the only evidence we found was the fact, yes, that it's been platted, it's been referred to as an unnamed street in deeds surrounding it. The aerial photography from the 50s that shows it being, developed, or at least, at the same time as the other two streets.
Mike, what is your recommendation?
It's difficult in light of the fact that, there are, his own admission that, delivery trucks use it. It's hard to say that it's not being used by the public.
So what happens, Mike, if we take it over or we give it to that gentleman? How do the delivery trucks get to where they need to be if that road is closed?
Well, they're gonna have to back up in other people's driveways.
I went tonight and looked at it, and I have a Tundra, and I had to do it like a
I went down
four-point
my
turn.
Tundra too.
Yeah, I went down Pine Drive, then I went down the other road and saw the road. It is passable. Our memo says no longer passable, so
Yeah.
to me, it looks like a road. I mean, if the town did maintain it, we would have to stop plowing it, signage, tree work, but it's only 125 feet, I think. Doesn't look that, that's something we should, if we keep it, should do. Speed limit 15 feet or 10.
Do we know how much more in taxes Paul would be paying if he acquires this piece?
I mean, it's
I don't know if you would know that.
it's minimal. It's a 20-foot wide right of way
Yeah, not a lot.
and it's not a lot.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a very small amount.
Thanks. Would you like to speak?
Evening, Council. Kurt Osman, I live at 8 Pine Drive. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. I do have a picture here of the recently taken, pass it around. There's some pictures there of some delivery trucks. My wife works from home, so since we got the notice 3 weeks ago, we kind of
started taking some pictures of FedEx trucks and whatnot. You know, we adamantly, you know, would like this not to be abandoned. First concern is, you know, emergency services. Paul stated that fire trucks will have no problem backing up. But I'm sure any fire chief, any police chief, any ambulance would tell you they'd probably rather pull through. It is a tight corner. Any access, even dragging hoses, there's no hydrants down there. If they have to access the water to pump up, to put a fire out, this would limit access to the Pine Drive side without cutting through someone's property. This would essentially make Pine Drive and Maui Drive both very limited and dead ends. The other thing is, you know, future utilities. It was interesting, the EPA was here tonight talking about, I do a lot of environmental work. We do a lot of work with the EPA. A plume of contamination. We all have wells down there. We all have septics. If something like that was to, and it's right on Log Road, which is, granted, it's a few miles away and the plume's heading north, but something like that happened, it would be very limited for a sewer or water line to have two dead end legs instead of a loop, which is always much more desirable. Also, if we ever, you know, if you did start treating the road, plowing it, maybe we could get our mail down there, we could get our garbage picked up in front of our house. Currently, we have to drag everything up to Log Road from where we are. So that would be great if, you know, you guys started maintaining that and plowing it. And, you know, the road really doesn't get plowed anyways. If there's only 6 inches, it just doesn't get plowed. Even Pine Drive doesn't get plowed. And the biggest concern is really the parcel delivery trucks. There's quite a few. You'd be surprised how many Amazon, FedEx trucks come down there. You know, anytime that you're backing up, I took some safety things here off of the DOT website, and roughly 1 out of every 4 accident involves backing. Considering the average driver operates in reverse less than a mile a year, this statistic is even more alarming. And the #1 tip is avoid backing at all possible. By blocking off this road, you're going to cause everybody to back up, and guess where they're going to turn around? It's going to be in my driveway or someone's lawn. Otherwise, they're going to have to back all the way up onto Log Road, which it's not easy to pull out of there, never mind back up. There's some more statistics here. I'm going to bore you with them all, but, you know, a lot of 50% of people killed in backing accident are children. My house is 5-bedroom. My kids are all grown and gone for the most part, but when we move, there's going to be some kids there, and I'd hate to see a FedEx truck backing up and backing over somebody. And you think that never really happens, but I work for Republic Services. We own landfills. Just this March 31st, my president put out a sad memo that one of our associates was run over on one of our landfills by a third-party truck and killed. So it does happen, even to an experienced person working in a landfill that's trained. So you can imagine a child wouldn't stand a chance. So I'd really, summarize, I just really would like you guys not to abandon this and maybe to start treating the road and plowing the road. And I'd like to thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Evening, members of the council, Mr. Rossi. Marianne Curry, at 8 Pine Drive, and I oppose, obviously, the abandonment of the town. Some of my reasons are very similar to his, but my first question is to either the town or Mr. Phillips. Who actually owns the road? Is it private, public, or even ancient? I couldn't find that in any archival information. Like, was it carved out by the Woonasquatucket Rivershed, or when the pond was carved out?
That's kind of the mystery, because there's typically, when you look at a, deed, it refers to some kind of a recorded plat, but there's no references in the deeds that we could find. And I know Mr. did some title search too, and they didn't come up with any, find anything that referenced what the road was, other than, it being an unnamed road. So it looks like it was in the early 50s when those lots were all platted.
I checked the Google Maps, and looks on Google Maps, Pine Drive goes to.
It actually goes through their property.
Yeah, the way they have it.
Look at it.
Yeah.
So there's kind of 2 iterations. One that cuts, I think, an adopted area that is up for petition, and then the mapped out area, which is kind of crazy. So I couldn't figure it out myself either. So that was my first question. Second one is obviously, you have the pictures, I don't know where they went, of the vehicles, the service vehicles, the delivery trucks, neighbors using the road. And yes, of course, we walk our dogs and our kids down the road as well. For those neighbors that were unable to make it tonight, I do have a petition. I don't know if you want me to pass this around or not. And lastly, obviously, the safety issue. Both, Mr. Lawton, you drove down the road, so you know how narrow the roads are. You know, they're single lane roads. Ours is only paved, Pine Drive is only paved because the previous owner of my house actually paved it because he used to build cars. So he paved it so we didn't have to get, you know, the cars all roughed up with the dirt road. So they're dirt roads. The other road, Maury, is actually kind of in worse shape because it divots and it's real narrow, and that's overgrown as well. So for a fire truck to go down there and put out, God forbid, and you know, a fire happen at the end of the road, you know, there's maybe one truck that can get down the road to put out a fire. At this point right now, we have two entry points to the water. We have the end of Pine and the other side of Maury. If this road gets abandoned and let's say fences go up and there's limited access, you're leaving the residents of the road at risk and devoid of any public safety with that limited access to water. And that's all I really had to state.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question for Mike. Mike, when your conversation with Gene Allen, is he okay taking care of that road now? If he's gonna use it?
Yeah, you're going to give them all kinds of money, right?
That wasn't the question.
I mean, and we had a discussion about paper roads like this, and we have roads like this all over town that we don't really know if we own them or not. And I think there needs to be a lot of research done.
You indicated in the beginning that he needed some room to make the turn for the trucks. So my thing is, if you need the room for the trucks, you can maintain a little bit of it so your trucks can turn around, correct?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they're going to have to do some work on it to level it, do whatever, make it so that it's, you know, a little bit more passable. But yeah, I mean, it would have some benefit, I think, for through movement of you know, the plow trucks being able to maneuver in and out. So that's what he was really talking about, was just kind of a hammerhead so you could, you know, turn in and out.
Okay.
I guess my question to the neighbors is, if we vote to not abandon this, are you wanting the town to maintain this road, or are you fine with it being at the way it is?
Yes.
I think we have. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should embrace it. I think you should absolutely leave it open, and it just needs to be cleared. You can see from the pictures, there's plenty of room. It's not overgrown. Yes, trees did fall, but the previous owner's policy covered the damage. So yes, we would like to see, maybe, actually, a couple of years ago, there was a town vehicle down there trimming the trees, the bush, the growth back. They did take care of it a couple of years ago, but we haven't seen much of that. And like my husband said, we don't even get plowed out when it snows under 6 inches. We have to call the town to remind them, hey, we're here, can you please come plow us out? So we're kind of a forgotten neighborhood. But yeah, we would love to see you embrace it and develop that road.
I'm sorry, you're saying you're fine with it staying that way, or you want it to be like a real road where it's...
I mean, I'm fine with it staying that way. It's passable. The trucks go through. You can clearly see there's like big FedEx trucks going through it. But yeah, I mean, if you want to take it on as a project, by all means.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? We'll close the public hearing.
Oh, she wants to
Oh,
speak.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Hi, Lisa Calistino. I live on Log Road, but it adjacent to Pine Drive. I would really not like this not to be closed off or, not allowed anybody to go through it. I am legally blind, and Log Road, as everybody knows, is a very dangerous road to walk on. And I house sit for dogs, I dog sit, so I do walk them. And it's easy for me, my neighbors let me go through their backyard. And then I go down Pine Drive, and I do use that little paper road or whatever you want to call it. And then I go up Maury, and then it's just a very short distance that I can cross to go to the nursing home and walk on their grass. So for me, it is a very personal, personal issue as to why I would love if you guys would leave it open, not abandon it. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
I want to ask the same question to Mr. McCarthy. If we decide not to abandon it, would you like to see it stay, or would you like to see it maintained?
I would like to stay the way it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We close the public hearing. And discussion. Actually, we'll make a motion on that. And one thing I'd like to, the FedEx and Amazon, they're all GPS. And to have them go down that road, I wonder if their company, that's their route, you know what I mean? The most efficient.
It's definitely possible, and a lot of times they even, we have the gate closed in the back of town hall, but regular GPS tells people to go that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think somehow they pick up these locations and add it to the GPS. And I would put money on it. If you Google it to get there, it would tell you to go that way, unfortunately.
Mr. President, if now is an appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to motion that we table the request for abandonment of a portion of Pine Drive right away.
The council has to weigh, the legal standard for road abandonment is the road has to, you can only abandon if the road ceases to be useful to the public, based on whatever evidence was presented tonight. The council has to make that decision before they abandon any road. So that's something you have to take into consideration, any motion that you make tonight.
And I would assume the burden is on the petitioner to demonstrate
It ceases to be
that it
useful.
ceases to be useful to
My
the
motion
public.
was just what you just said, right?
Yours was to table it.
Yes, so I'm not in favor of accepting the abandonment of the property. That's to table, right? Is that?
Well, no, so it's either approve or deny. Table is basically.
Deny it then, sorry. Deny it. That's my motion. Not go with the terminology yet.
Yeah?
It changes on the fly for me, I guess.
So your motion is to keep it
deny.
as it is and not.
Yeah, keep it as it is, deny the request for
Deny
abandonment.
the petition.
A lot harder. I thought it was going to be.
No problem. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can we take the money out of Mike Phillips's budget and give it to the highway department to maintain that road?
We're gonna have him out there with a shovel instead.
I think now that we know there's a concern out there, we'll be out there a lot more. And
Yes.
It's on the list.
yeah, the list. Item B, conduct a public hearing to consider, discuss, and act upon approving the transfer of a Class B victualler license from Douglas Eatery LLC, DBA Twin Rivers Pizzeria, Crazy Wings Thai Cafe, located at 55 Douglas Pike, to Douglas Eatery LLC, DBA Twin River Pizzeria, Crazy Wings Thai Cafe, to include outdoor seating and bar service, same location due to a transfer of stock shares as applied, with the hours of operation being Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 1 a.m., subject to compliance with all state regulations, local ordinances, a certificate of good standing from the Rhode Island Division of Taxation, and signature of the owner of the premises. I could declare this public hearing open. Anyone from the public would like to speak, they can come up to the podium. Linz, everything's good order for this?
Still have those outstanding items.
Mhm.
Other than that,
So we would, if approved, pending. And anyone from the public like to speak? All right, public hearing is now closed. Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion, we accept it pending all the rest of the paperwork in line.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're on to licenses. Consider, discuss, and act upon approving the annual renewal of 7 holiday sales licenses as listed, as applied, subject to compliance with all state regulations and local ordinances.
Move passage.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, consider, discuss, and act upon approving the annual renewal of 1 massage establishment license as applied, subject to compliance with all state regulations and local ordinances.
Move passage.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item C, consider, discuss, and act upon approving the annual renewal of 3 massage therapy licenses as listed, as applied, subject to compliance with all state regulations and local ordinances.
Move passage.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 1 second. Just move. Consider, discuss, and act upon approving the annual renewal of 1 peddler's license as applied, subject to compliance with all state regulations and local ordinances.
Move passage.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries. Old business, new business. Consider, discuss, and act upon authorizing the police department to purchase a Wi-Fi flash upgrade for its 800 MHz portable radios through the NASPO contract in the amount of $12,483.00, with funds available in the Bryant Capital contributions.
Good evening, Chief St. Severe Smithfield Police. Also, I have, there we go, Officer Gary McDowell here with me as well, in case you have any technical questions that I simply can't answer. About a year ago, the police department transitioned from VHF frequency over to the 800 megahertz system. That system is working quite well, has improved our radio transmissions tremendously. But at that time, when we were making the transition, we anticipated that there may be a reduction in signal strength within buildings. So that is to say that an officer inside a building could transmit on the radio and the dispatcher wouldn't hear them. So we anticipated that may be a problem. In fact, that became a problem in our own police station. So we had to install what's referred to as a BDA loop. It's a bidirectional antenna. And that was to the tune of about $25,000, just so our portable radios would work properly and reach the dispatcher in our own police station. In the last year or so, we've had enough time to assess this reduction in signal in buildings throughout the town. In particular, we noted a signal strength problem in some of the schools. So an easy fix is to upgrade our portable radios with this Wi-Fi flash upgrade. And if I'm wrong, Officer McDowell will correct me, but what should happen is we would be able to work off of a building's Wi-Fi. So if we go into a building and our regular signal strength is weak, it'll pick up the Wi-Fi of that building and transmit properly. So our ask to the town is for us to be able to purchase this Wi-Fi flash upgrade in the amount of $12,483. And this would be through the NASPO contract price. NASPO, by the way, is National Association of State Procurement Officials. And this would be paid for through the Bryant Capital Contributions Fund.
Chief, I just had a quick question if I could. When you were talking about the the walkies being able to get onto the Wi-Fi when you go into different buildings for service, for better service. Do you need the login credentials for that building? Would you need to get their approval first?
Yeah, good evening. Yes, so RISCON, REMA, I should say, Rhode Island EMA, State EMA is the one who manages the RISCON system. They are the ones who are taking over this whole project, essentially. So yeah, there is it's a hidden Wi-Fi network that we would have to go around and put into all of these buildings. But yeah, it's a secure access network. Like, you wouldn't be able to pick it up on your Wi-Fi if you found it on your phone, like if it was in this building. But all of that would be placed into any building that it would go into. And then the portable radios, once they get the upgrade, would recognize that. Similar to how your cell phone works with Wi-Fi calling, would be a similar process. Thank you.
How old are the current radios they have?
The portable radios that we have a little more than a year old. We haven't had them very long.
Wow.
Are you guys on 3G, 4G, 5G as a
So,
station?
To my understanding, as far as radio communications go, RISCON, again, going back to and when I say RISCON, there's probably less than 8 police agencies not on this network in the state. Every surrounding agency, that was the main reason why we actually moved to it from our VHF, was the interoperability, but every surrounding police agency is on RISCON. It's a very stable system. It's been around for years. It is only it's not cell-based at this time, to my understanding. So unfortunately, the radios we have do not tap into cellular. But that's not just us, that's everybody. That system may expand out to that at some point. We were lucky enough to, when we purchased these radios about 1.5 years or so ago, the ones we purchased were basically built for future expansion. So, and this flash is only available from the Motorola radios that we have. So like other manufacturers, that Wi-Fi capability is not acceptable for them. They don't allow that. So,
Is it just a simple plug and play, like a SIM card, or?
So to my understanding, we would order, I believe it just comes in and literally like a flash drive. We would bring it over to the techs at REMA, and they would just basically plug it in and do like an update really in the radios. And then, the legwork is going around to the buildings and having them put that stuff in, put the network in. So in the town buildings, that would be a relatively easier thing. It's when we branch out to like Fidelity and Bryant and some of the other private businesses, to try to get them to put it in there to beef up our signal strength. But as far as the actual hardware, I believe it's just kind of purchasing it and then just installing it.
So it does say here, the upgrade will allow your radios to switch to a building's Wi-Fi network. So it sounds like it does go with not that that's an issue, I'm just saying.
Yeah, so it would pick up the Wi-Fi. So it actually, the signal strength, the way that they have it programmed is, once it drops below 60%, it automatically will pick up the Wi-Fi, but it has to, it wouldn't pick up like any Wi-Fi. It needs to have that secured RISCON network put into it. So like this building, for example, we would get with the IT personnel and have them put that secured network in there so that only our radios would pick it up. It wouldn't, if you had your cell phone up and you were looking for Wi-Fi networks, it wouldn't say RISCON network on it because it's hidden.
Okay.
So it would pick up any network that has it in there.
It would, you said? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
as long as it has that RISCON network in. So if I went to 300 places in town here and had them put it all in there, all 300 buildings would pick that up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Would you, well, maybe it's you, would you explain the Bryant Capital Contributions Fund, how it works? Is that a in lieu of taxes fund?
Correct. That is the in lieu of taxes situation with Bryant, where we charge for every run that goes up to Bryant, police and fire. So there's a set rate that's based on the CPI, and it fluctuates up every year. The minimum, I forgot if it's a minimum of 2% or 3% increase, but whatever the CPI is, we increase it, and those funds get put aside for the capital needs of the police and fire departments.
You know how much is in the fund right now?
Off the top of my head.
Are there two separate funds, one for
No,
police and one
it's
for
one
fire?
combined.
It goes into one?
Correct.
And that's my fault because I meant to ask the town manager how much money was in that fund before this meeting. I
We
apologize.
can definitely cover the 12,000.
Did you guys have the option to do this initially, or was it not available?
Well, it
Just
likely
curious.
was available.
So the actual, we're, as far as I know, I should never be confused as a radio personnel person. I'm a police officer first, but within, I would say, being in this position of kind of managing our own radios, I do kind of deal with the REMA techs a lot. We're probably going to be one of the first. So this is a relatively new thing that they're rolling out. They did extensive testing on it to make sure that it was secure over the last couple of years before they wanted to branch out. Because like I mentioned previously, we're lucky enough to kind of purchase the radios for future expansion. We're probably going to be one of the first few to do it. I know Gloucester PD already has it, and I know State Police is actually in the process of doing it, but we're probably going to be right behind them if it gets approved to be kind of right in that running there. So it's fairly new. It's only rolled out in the last couple months.
Thank you.
Move passage, Mr. President.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with them. Item B, consider, discuss, and act upon authorizing the school department to advertise a request for proposals for construction services for the Boyle Athletic Complex at the Smithfield High School, subject to review and approval by the solicitor. This is the schedule. Yep.
Thank you, Council President. So this was approved by the Boyle Athletic Complex Committee as well as the school committee last evening. This RFP getting out on the street will keep us on our timetable to get construction, hopefully the end of May, beginning of June, and then have the field complete and installed, hopefully by the end of November. So it's the game plan. It's just missing the fall season. They made sure that we set the timeline to be after the spring session of sports, as well as to meet the deadlines of RIDE and their completion. We had to wait for their approval on this before we can consider it. So this is the next stage in the process.
Move passage.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item C, consider, discuss, and act upon authorizing the school department to advertise a request for proposals for replacement rooftop HVAC units, subject to review and approval by the solicitor.
Thank you again, Council President. So this item goes hand in, well, not exactly hand in hand with the other project, but it's kind of the two focuses of the Boyle Athletic Committee, Building Committee. So this is to replace the units at the high school for ventilation that's funded almost completely, this portion of it, by the ESSER funds that the school department received. So I know I've already, in prior meetings, we've approved the purchase of the actual units, so this is to actually have them installed and tie them into the existing the new HVAC units that will be coming in with the Honeywell project.
How old are the ones that they have now?
I think they're original, but I don't know the exact time. I know they're up there.
Breathing the same air for years.
It's always fresh.
So
Second.
I have one more question. Is it just the high school or is it the middle school as well?
For the rooftop units is just the high school. The energy and HVAC improvement is at the high school and the middle school. This is just one piece that's additional for the high school.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item D, consider, discuss, and act upon authorizing the school department to advertise a request for proposals for a high school athletic trainer.
This, as well as the next item, they come up every couple of years for the school department. We just do the advertising, go out on their behalf through our purchasing department. This is for the athletic trainer to attend and participate in all the sports events for the children.
Is this a new position or?
No, it's an exit. They've continued to outsource this in contract with someone. I don't know. I can't remember the gentleman's name that does it right now, but this is the time period of that agreement is over. So this needs to go back out.
For a specific,
Every sport.
every sport, okay, thank you.
Move passage.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item E, consider, discuss, and act upon authorizing the school department to advertise a request for proposals for snow removal.
Thank you, Council President. This is another item that goes on I think it's usually a 3-year basis that they go back out for this service. The current contract will be expiring at the end of June.
Move passage.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. F, consider, discuss, and act upon authorizing the school department to advertise a request for proposals for Innovation Learning Lab STEM equipment.
Thank you, Council President. So this is to advance their learning lab areas at the schools. So this is for some additional equipment to meet the needs of the curriculum for the STEM and STEAM. And I think there's another additional group that I'm missing, but those two main ones are included in this proposal.
Move passage.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up is public comment. Anyone from the public like to come up and speak, they're more than welcome. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Self real big.